The sound of silverware clinking against fine china mingled with the soft hum of conversation in La Fontaine, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. White linen cloths draped elegantly over tables, crystal glasses shimmered under warm golden lights, and the delicate aroma of truffle and rosemary wafted through the air. Patrons, clad in tailored suits and glittering evening gowns, whispered in low, cultured tones, creating a tableau of refinement and indulgence. The entire place seemed wrapped in an invisible bubble of sophistication, as if the troubles of the outside world dared not intrude. And then came the cry. At first, it was small, almost a squeak, a baby's whimper that might have gone unnoticed if it had faded quickly. But within seconds, the sound rose into a wail that echoed against the ornate walls, piercing through the polite murmur of the restaurant like a jarring note in a symphony. Heads turned, eyebrows furrowed. The conductor of the evening's carefully curated ambience was suddenly replaced by the raw, unrestrained voice of an infant who cared nothing for prestige or price tags. The baby belonged to Nathaniel Royce, billionaire real estate mogul, whose name regularly graced the covers of financial magazines and whose deals shaped the skylines of major cities. Known for his towering height, silver-streaked hair, and signature steel-gray suits, Nathaniel was a man rarely caught off guard. Yet tonight, sitting at a corner table with his 8-month-old son, Aiden, squirming in a high chair beside him, he looked utterly helpless. Nathaniel had recently become a single father after tragedy struck. His wife, Eleanor, had passed away unexpectedly just weeks after Aiden's birth. Since then, Nathaniel had been balancing business empires and fatherhood with admirable determination, though it was no secret that both roles demanded more than even he could give. In boardrooms, he remained commanding and decisive, but at home he often found himself staring at bottles, diapers, and lullabies as though they were unsolvable puzzles. Tonight, however, the puzzle wasn't at home. It was unraveling right in front of him, under the judgmental eyes of the city's elite. "Shoo, Aiden, please," Nathaniel whispered, bouncing the child gently on his knee. But Aiden's cries only grew louder, shrill, and insistent. The baby's tiny fists flailed in the air, his face flushed crimson as tears streamed down his cheeks. In his frantic movements, he knocked over a glass of sparkling water, sending droplets across the pristine white tablecloth. From across the room, disapproving murmurs began to grow louder. "Really, at La Fontaine?" one woman hissed to her husband, shaking her diamond-clad wrist in irritation. "He should have hired a nanny," another muttered, her lips pursed tightly. "This isn't a daycare." A man grumbled under his breath, rolling his eyes toward the ceiling. Nathaniel felt the sting of their judgment like sharp needles pressing into his skin. He had weathered lawsuits, market crashes, and hostile takeovers, but nothing compared to the humiliating helplessness of being unable to soothe his son in a place where silence and grace were currency. He felt the heavy weight of every stare, as though the entire restaurant had paused to measure his failure not as a businessman, but as a father. At that moment, Denise Carter, a waitress at La Fontaine, approached the table. Denise was in her early 40s, her hair pulled neatly into a bun, her uniform crisp but simple. She had worked at La Fontaine for over a decade, and she was known among staff for her calm demeanor and her uncanny ability to handle even the most difficult guests with unwavering patience. But tonight, her heart tightened not at the billionaire's frustration, nor at the other patrons' irritation. It tightened at the baby's desperate cries. "Sir, is there anything I can do to help?" Denise asked softly, her voice carrying a warmth that set it apart from the restaurant's practiced politeness. Nathaniel looked up at her, his eyes tired and shadowed. "Unless you have a miracle tucked away in your apron, I don't think so." He attempted a weary smile, but it faltered before reaching his eyes. Denise hesitated. She knew stepping beyond her duties could cost her this job, especially in a place like La Fontaine, where management demanded efficiency and invisibility from staff. But before she could decide whether to risk it, a small figure appeared beside her. It was her 16-year-old daughter, Maya, who often came by after school to help fold napkins in the back or wait for her mother's shift to end. Maya was tall for her age, with warm brown skin, curious almond-shaped eyes, and a smile that seemed to brighten even the dimmest corners of a room. She had been reading quietly in the staff corner, absorbed in her book, but had been drawn out by the piercing cries of the baby. "Mom, Maya," whispered, tugging at Denise's sleeve. "I think I can help." Denise's eyes widened. "Maya, this isn't—" But before she could finish, Maya stepped forward toward the billionaire's table. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone far older than 16, her gaze fixed not on the intimidating figure of Nathaniel Royce, but on the distressed infant writhing in his father's arms. "Hi there," Maya said, gently lowering her voice so that only Nathaniel and Aiden could hear. "May I try?" Nathaniel blinked, taken aback. He had grown used to people either recoiling from his crying son or casting judgmental stares from a safe distance, but here was a teenager offering help without hesitation. His pride wrestled with his desperation, but the sound of Aiden's cries and the growing murmur of disapproval from the other patrons tipped the balance. "Please," he sighed, his voice low, as he carefully shifted Aiden toward her. Maya reached out, her hands steady despite the stares of the room. To everyone's surprise, including her mother's, Aiden quieted the moment he was cradled in her arms. His cries softened into whimpers, then hiccups, and finally into silence. Maya rocked him gently, humming a soft tune under her breath, her voice lilting and sweet. The baby's eyelids fluttered, his tiny fist clutching at the fabric of her sweater as though anchoring himself to safety. Within moments, Aiden was asleep. The restaurant seemed to hold its collective breath. Diners who had been muttering complaints moments earlier now sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the sight before them. The billionaire's baby, once the source of chaos and irritation, was now nestled peacefully in the arms of a waitress's teenage daughter. Nathaniel exhaled a long, weary breath that carried both relief and something deeper, wonder. He stared at Maya, his business-hardened exterior softening in a way that surprised even him. "How did you—" He trailed off, unable to finish the question. Maya smiled, not boastful but calm, as though what she had done was the most natural thing in the world. "Babies just like to know they're safe. My little cousin cries a lot, too. I sing to him until he falls asleep." For the first time that evening, Nathaniel's hard, businesslike exterior cracked. His eyes softened as he looked at Maya, then at Denise, and a quiet gratitude filled his voice. "Thank you," he said simply, but the weight behind the words was immense. Denise shifted, uneasily, her hands clasped in front of her. She knew the restaurant's management would not approve of Maya stepping in. But at that moment, seeing her daughter cradle the billionaire's baby with such ease and tenderness, she felt an overwhelming swell of pride. For years, she had worked tirelessly to give Maya a better life, and here was proof of the strength and kindness her daughter carried into the world. As the evening continued, Nathaniel kept stealing glances at Maya, who remained nearby, with Aiden still nestled against her. Each time the baby stirred, she soothed him back into slumber with a gentle hum or a soft pat. For the first time in months, Nathaniel felt as though he could breathe, not as a billionaire burdened by empires and expectations, but as a father grateful for the compassion of a stranger. What neither Nathaniel nor Denise nor Maya realized in that moment was that this seemingly ordinary evening, an outburst of infant cries, a teenager's instinct to comfort, and a billionaire's humbled heart, was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change all of their lives forever. The following morning, Nathaniel Royce could not stop thinking about the girl. Not in the way society's gossip-hungry tabloids might twist, but in the most genuine human sense. He thought about the calmness in her eyes, the way she had stepped forward without fear, the way she had soothed Aiden with no expectation of recognition or reward. For a man who lived in a world of transactions where every gesture was weighed, priced, and bargained, her simple act of kindness felt like a priceless rarity. At breakfast, as Aiden played with his toy blocks on the polished marble floor of the penthouse kitchen, Nathaniel found his mind drifting back to the restaurant scene. The stares of the wealthy patrons, the sting of their judgment, and then the unexpected salvation that had come not from a professional nanny or a doctor, but from the waitress's teenage daughter. He remembered the hush that had fallen over the restaurant when the cries stopped, and how strangely peaceful it had felt to watch someone else hold his son with such natural ease. By mid-morning, Nathaniel had made up his mind. He instructed his assistant to locate Denise Carter, the waitress who had approached him the night before. Within hours, his office had secured her number from the restaurant's records. When Nathaniel called, Denise's voice on the other end was cautious, almost defensive. "Mr. Royce?" she asked, clearly surprised. "Yes," Nathaniel replied smoothly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to thank you again for last night. More importantly, I want to thank your daughter. Maya, was it?" Denise's silence was thick with hesitation. "She was only trying to help, sir. Please don't think she was out of line." Nathaniel chuckled softly, though there was no arrogance in his tone. "Out of line? Ms. Carter, she accomplished in minutes what I could not in hours. She saved us both from disaster last night. I was wondering, would Maya be interested in spending some time with Aiden? As well as a babysitter, perhaps?" Denise's instinct was to refuse outright. She had worked too long in service to the wealthy to not be wary. She had seen kindness repaid with exploitation, and she had vowed to shield her daughter from entanglements that might compromise her. But she also knew the struggles they faced. Her paycheck barely covered the rent on their small apartment, utilities, and Maya's school expenses. Babysitting for a billionaire could change everything. "I'll have to ask her," Denise said, finally, choosing her words with care. When Maya heard, she was stunned. "Me? Babysit for him? Mom, that's—" She broke off, her thoughts tripping over themselves. "Unrealistic? Maybe." But he asked, Denise replied, studying her daughter's face. "You don't have to say yes." Maya thought of Aiden's tiny hand clutching her sweater, the way his sobs had melted into peaceful sleep against her shoulder. She remembered the loneliness in Nathaniel's eyes, hidden behind the polished exterior of power. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "I'll do it." The first time Maya arrived at the Royce penthouse, she felt like she had stepped into another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, the city below sprawling like a living painting. Modern art pieces adorned every wall, their abstract colors clashing, yet somehow fitting together. A grand piano stood in the corner of the living room, though its polished keys looked untouched, a showpiece rather than an instrument of joy. Aiden greeted her with a squeal of recognition, his tiny arms stretching out eagerly as though he remembered her from the restaurant. His giggle rang out like music, filling the sterile elegance of the penthouse with warmth. Nathaniel stood back, observing with astonishment. The baby who usually fussed with strangers clung to Maya as though she had been part of his life all along. Within minutes, she had him laughing, full, bubbling giggles that made Nathaniel's chest tighten with something he hadn't felt in a long time, relief. Days turned into weeks, and Maya's role grew from occasional babysitter to indispensable companion for Aiden. She played with him on the soft rugs, sang to him as she rocked him in her arms, and even coaxed his first attempts at crawling across the hardwood floor. Nathaniel watched quietly, his heart swelling with gratitude, and something else he struggled to name. It wasn't merely gratitude. It was hope. Hope that his son might grow up surrounded not just by luxury, but by genuine love and care. But the world outside was not so kind. When word spread that the billionaire Nathaniel Royce was often seen accompanied by a teenage girl and her waitress mother, whispers began to swirl. Wealthy circles sneered, assuming scandal where none existed. Newspapers published blurry photographs of Maya carrying Aiden in the park, attaching suggestive headlines that questioned Nathaniel's motives. At La Fontaine, Denise began to notice icy stares from patrons who had once greeted her politely. At school, Maya endured cruel whispers. "Gold digger's daughter," one classmate hissed as she passed in the hallway. "She's only babysitting to get rich," another sneered. Maya tried to shrug it off, but the sting was real. She didn't care about Nathaniel's fortune. She cared about Aiden, the baby who smiled when she sang, who reached for her the moment she walked into a room, who had become more like family than a job. One evening, after a particularly long day, Denise arrived at the penthouse to pick Maya up. She found Nathaniel sitting in the nursery, his usually composed face shadowed with weariness. Aiden was asleep in the crib, his small hands clutching the stuffed bunny Maya had given him. The soft glow of the nightlight painted Nathaniel's features in a way that revealed the cracks beneath his polished surface. "Miss Carter," he said, quietly lifting his gaze, "I don't know how to thank you, or Maya. You've given my son more than I ever could alone. And you've given me faith that maybe I can do this." Denise's guarded expression softened. For the first time, she didn't see the billionaire who owned skyscrapers and controlled markets. She saw a father grieving, struggling, yet determined to love his child despite his flaws and failings. "Maya doesn't see your bank account, Mr. Royce," Denise said gently. "She sees a baby who needs her. Maybe that's what you both need. Someone who doesn't expect anything in return." Nathaniel nodded slowly, his throat tight. For a man who had spent his life building empires, calculating risks, and conquering opponents, he was learning that the greatest wealth came not from power or possessions, but from the simple, uncalculated kindness of others. From that night forward, an unspoken understanding grew between the three of them. Maya continued to care for Aiden, but it was no longer just a job. It was a bond. Denise remained cautious, yet she couldn't deny the way her daughter's spirit seemed brighter, fuller, every time she returned from the penthouse. Nathaniel, meanwhile, found himself changing in small ways. He left the office earlier. He spent more evenings at home. He even learned to hum one of Maya's lullabies, awkwardly at first, but with growing confidence. And so, in the most unlikely of places, a fine restaurant disrupted by an infant's cries, the lives of a billionaire, a waitress, and her daughter became forever intertwined. Out of chaos had come connection, out of judgment had come grace, and out of a baby's desperate cries had come a reminder. Love, in its truest form, is blind to status, color, and wealth. For Nathaniel Royce, the richest lesson of all came not from boardrooms or bank accounts, but from the unthinkable act of a waitress's daughter who dared to listen, to comfort, and to care,